This video is brought to you by Equipment Experts. Look, if you're tired of wasting your time hunting for used equipment and trucks across multiple websites, check out equipmentexperts.com. Hey guys, what's going on? Wayne here. As I'm sure you're aware, GM recently unveiled a certain truck that has a lot riding on it, to put it mildly. Of course, I'm talking about the 2022 Hummer EV, which is simultaneously a resurrection of the Hummer brand. It's GM's latest and largest electric vehicle, and maybe GM's most important vehicle release in at least the last 50 years. Now, I think this truck is going to be a legacy setter for GM as we move into this new age of electrified vehicles. With Tesla with this massive lead and, presumably doing well, GM has kind of come out of nowhere here with the advancement of its Ultium battery technology, what looks like solid battery technology, and with this Hummer EV, a real opportunity to make a statement in the electric vehicle market. But I think it's important to note at the top here, most of our attention on this channel is definitely paid to diesel and gas-powered heavy equipment and trucks that are designed primarily for work. So right off the top, is this a work truck? No, it starts at $112,000 and it's got a 5-foot bed. But that doesn't mean it's not important to the future of pickups in general. Because at the end of the day, GM has invested loads of time and cash into the Ultium battery technology that's at the core of this truck. Now, obviously there are a lot of other players involved right now, but that Ultium battery technology is really the only other huge ball of positive momentum in EVs outside of what Tesla has achieved. And when you consider the fact that the Hummer EV will be rolled out over the next 4 years, GM's approach here seems to be at the very least intentional. Plus, I think the Hummer EV provides a good moment in time to wade into the big horsepower and torque numbers that have surrounded this truck's introduction and really try to make sense of those, as well as how to navigate these big specs that have been kind of surrounding electric vehicles in general as electric pickups become more prominent. So yeah, let's get into it. Now, to start, we should provide some context around this thing, what it is conceptually and where it's going to fit in the market. Now, there has been some talk about this truck coming, solely in response to Tesla's Cybertruck, that, you had this Ultium battery technology and they were looking for like a big kind of whiz-bang way to kind of, put it into the market. Tesla put out a Cybertruck. How about we resurrect the Hummer? And the fact that it's a Hummer, and it's huge, and it has a moon mission themed interior, and they're calling it a super truck. Those are certainly good arguments for they did this in response to the Cybertruck side of things. And while the Hummer EV's screen-heavy interior and little Easter eggs like the charging indicator built into the headlamps, fun little touches like that are clearly touches influenced by some of Tesla's fun designs and hidden features, everything else about this truck, to me, shows GM's willingness to establish its own specific vision for electrification, and that's important. For starters, yes, it's a Hummer, but this time around the Hummer is simply a model name under the GMC brand rather than its own sub-brand like it was before. That this truck is a GMC was necessary because it's super expensive. Now, for a while, GM has used the word pro and professional around the GMC brand in the hopes of convincing business owners that what is really just a luxury package Chevrolet was somehow better suited for real work. To be honest though, professional grade is definitely better than fancy businessman truck. But the whole professional grade thing kind of falls apart with the Hummer EV, which was placed in the GMC lineup mainly because putting a $112,000 truck in the Chevy lineup would make absolutely no sense. We'll get into why this thing is so expensive and some of the cheaper ways to get into it later, but the main thing to know at this point in the discussion is that it will initially cost $112,000. And it's also an important number to note because if/when the Cybertruck launches, you're gonna be able to grab a base model of that truck thing for only $39,000, while the top of the line model of the Cybertruck will run you a little less than $70,000. Now, that is pricing that makes it pretty clear that Musk & Co. were targeting the class 1 and 2 market of current pickup truck buyers. GMC, on the other hand, is initially going after its wealthiest of customers. Now, what's confusing about the Hummer EV is all the focus on off-roading. It's a GMC pickup that costs $112,000 and it can hit 0 to 60 in 3 seconds and it can crab walk. That's just a lot going on. Now, I know plenty of folks take expensive rigs off-roading. It's just hard to imagine many of them doing that with this truck at this price point in particular. I'm not saying it's impossible, just saying highly unlikely. But I mean, let's play devil's advocate. Let's say that you buy this thing and you're rock crawling and you're on a trail somewhere and you run out of juice. What do you do? Last I checked, charging stations weren't that ubiquitous. Which really brings me back to what I said earlier. This is very, very much a truck that is intended to make a statement. And that statement is that electric trucks, are you ready? Electric trucks won't be a downgrade from diesel and gas-powered trucks. GM is actually saying that electric trucks will be such a substantial upgrade that we're gonna go ahead and call this thing a super truck and charge you 112 grand, because what other truck can do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds and rock crawl? All right, so let's go ahead and get into the specific specs, is that redundant? That allow for all this super truck performance. For starters, the Hummer EV that will launch late next year will be called the Edition 1. The chassis of this truck will be a skateboard design with all of the batteries kind of stored in the middle of the chassis in that vast space between both sets of wheels. Now, this is GM's highly anticipated, highly hyped Ultium battery system that's providing all the power from 24 battery modules that are double stacked, meaning 12 modules in one layer on the bottom and then another 12 modules and another on top. And of course, all of those modules technically contain multiple batteries. But the main thing to know about the spec of the Ultium system found on the Hummer EV Edition 1 specifically is that this is a 200 kilowatt hour system, and that is the biggest and most powerful battery system on the market today by a very wide margin. For instance, Tesla's largest battery is currently 100 kilowatt hours. And GM says this battery system will provide the Hummer EV Edition 1 with 350 plus miles of range. Another note on this battery system, GM says it will be compatible with 800 volt DC fast charging at up to 350 kilowatts. And all of those numbers basically mean that you'll be able to plug this thing in and get 100 miles of range pretty quickly, in about 10 minutes. Now, the Ultium system provides power to an electronic 4-wheel drive system that is comprised of 3 motors, 2 in the rear and 1 up front. And all 3 motors are rated at 250 kilowatts, and that rating times the 3 motors brings you to a total of 750 kilowatts of available power, which is equivalent to about 1,005 horsepower. Now, we're gonna get back to the motors and how they play into the off-roading features of this truck in a little bit, but first, I wanna talk about torque. Now, in addition to that 1,000 horsepower rating that GMC is touting on this truck, they're also saying it provides a monstrous 11,500 pound-feet of torque, a number that, obviously absolutely dwarfs the 1,050 pound-feet of torque created by the current torque king of pickups, Ford's 6.7 liter Power Stroke diesel. So, given these numbers, I guess diesel should just pack it up and go home, right? Well, not quite. See, that 1,050 pound-feet of torque rating on the 6.7 liter Power Stroke, and also the 910 pound-feet of torque rating on GM's own 6.6 liter Duramax, those are motor torque ratings. They measure the torque coming from the engine itself. Now, the 11,500 pound-feet rating on the Hummer EV Edition 1, that is a wheel torque rating. And comparing these two ratings is far from apples to apples. Basically, wheel torque is the amount of power that the motor delivers to the wheels themselves. And as explained by the excellent video put out recently by Engineering Explained, seriously, be sure to check that video out. I've got it linked below, it's incredible. The max wheel torque rating in a conventional truck with an internal combustion engine, you derive that by multiplying, you ready, motor torque by the gear ratio in first gear as well as the final drive ratio to figure out how much power the engine is providing at the wheel. Now, in an electric vehicle like the Hummer EV, this equation is a bit simpler because the truck's motors are connected directly to the wheels. Because of that, you only multiply the motor torque by the final drive ratio. Okay, so we've got 2 equations, right? One for electric vehicles and one for combustion engine vehicles. So if we apply the combustion engine vehicle version of that equation to a 2020 Ford F-250 with 1,050 pound-feet of torque, a first gear ratio of 4.615 in first gear, and a final drive ratio of 4.3, we get a huge 20,836 pound-feet of wheel torque, way more than the Hummer EV's now measly looking 11,500 pound-feet. Now, just to round out this diesel comparison, the 2020 GMC Sierra 2500 HD's 910 pound-feet multiplied by a 4.54 first gear ratio and 3.42 final drive ratio amounts to 14,129 pound-feet of torque. However, this doesn't mean the Hummer EV will be a slouch when it comes to torque, just that it's not quite in the same league as the most powerful diesel trucks yet. In his video, Jason over at Engineering Explained did the reverse math on all of this to estimate that the Hummer's 3 motors will generate around 335 pound-feet of torque each for a total of around 1,000 pound-feet of available motor torque. Plus, because it doesn't have to worry about a transmission with multiple gear ratios, the Hummer EV can apply all of that torque instantly, which is why you're going to be able to go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds with this thing. Now, after all these years of marketing motor torque with pickups, it's pretty unclear why wheel torque has become the go-to measurement for electric vehicles. Maybe it's the fact that a cumulative torque rating between multiple motors may seem confusing to the marketing departments, or maybe it's just the fact that 11,500 or 20,000 pound-feet is a more eye-catching number than 900 or 1,000. But it's an important distinction to be aware of as you start comparing diesel trucks to electric trucks as more electric trucks start to enter the market. I mean, after all, Ford says its electric F-150 is only like a year or so away. Now, there is one last note to make here on torque, and it's a pretty important one. Now, as we just addressed, GMC definitely wants everyone to know that 11,500 pound-feet torque number because truck buyers love big torque numbers. But with trucks, those torque numbers are important because they make towing and hauling easier. Interestingly enough, while we know everything else about this truck, we know absolutely nothing about its towing and payload capabilities. Now, we do know that there is a tow haul drive mode that is one of 5 drive modes that you can select, but as of right now, GMC has not said exactly how much this truck can tow or haul. And that probably has something to do with the likelihood that when you pull or haul stuff in this thing, it's going to have an impact on battery range. Or it could be the fact that that 1,000 horsepower rating that we talked about earlier is really only fully available when you put the truck into watts to freedom mode. That's the mode that you have to put this thing in to pull off that 0 to 60 in 3 seconds stunt. And it's unclear how much horsepower is available outside of that mode or in tow haul mode. Hopefully in tow haul mode, that available horsepower would be comparable to the 1,000 in the fancy 0 to 60 mode, but who knows? Now, with all of this truck's power, and there is a considerable amount of it, it's hard to imagine that it won't be competitive with conventional half-ton towing and payload ratings. But if/when/how GMC and other truck makers will communicate towing and hauling's impact on range will be something to look at moving forward, and it's going to be interesting to see. Okay, so moving on from torque, let's talk a bit more about this 3-motor setup on the Hummer EV. Now, the way this motor setup breaks down is that the single motor drive unit up front has a 13.3 to 1 fixed gear ratio and provides power to both wheels through an electronic locking differential. But in back, things get a little bit more interesting. Now, the rear drive unit has 2 motors, one connected directly to each wheel and with a fixed gear ratio of 10.5 to 1. Now, because there's a motor for each wheel in the rear, there's no locking differential back there. Instead, GM is employing a pretty cool trick here. Because each wheel has a motor, the Hummer can actually vary the amount of torque that goes to each of these wheels. Now, that comes in handy in providing an exceptional amount of traction at each wheel, no matter if you're driving off-road or on. But the independent drive to each wheel that enables variable torque also allows the motors to synchronize wheel speed. Are you kind of seeing where this is going? And that synchronization between wheel speed can be used to simulate a locking rear differential. Now, this 3-motor setup also enables another cool steering trick that by this point you've no doubt seen, which is called Crabwalk. Now, obviously the front axle turns both wheels in the same direction, but since the rear wheels are independently powered, the Hummer EV Edition 1 can also turn those rear wheels up to 10 degrees in the direction of the front wheels. Now, with all 4 tires turned the same direction, you can move the vehicle diagonally, allowing you to get out of tight spots or evade obstacles more easily when this thing is off-road. Plus, looks cool. Now, there's a ton of other stuff going on with this truck, including hands-free semi-autonomous driving that folks have at least been initially impressed by. That's clearly, something in response to some of what Tesla's done. There's also an extract mode that uses the truck's all-around air suspension to lower ride height from the default 10 inches of ground clearance down to 8 when you're entering and exiting the vehicle, but it can also raise ride height of the truck up to nearly 16 inches in extract mode if you need more ground clearance when you're off-roading. There's also a ton of underbody armor, including 5 skid plates and 2 underbody shields to protect all the expensive components and batteries on this thing. There's even cameras under the body as well to give you a better view of what you're crawling over. And maybe most importantly, at least to me, because there's no engine, there is a front trunk space. God, I love a good frunk. At the top of the video, I said this truck would be released over the course of the next 4 years. Here's how that's gonna work. The Hummer EV Edition 1, the truck we've talked about here at length, with 3 motors, 1,000 horsepower, 11,500 pound-feet of wheel torque, and 350 plus miles of range, that truck is slated for release in the latter half of 2021. And as we have said, it will cost $112,000. By the way, it will cost $112,000 because GMC says that this will be a no haggle price point, which is a nice way of saying that's what you're gonna pay, guys. Now, for 2022, GM has planned the release of the Hummer EV 3X. Are you ready for some super confusing model names? Which keeps the Edition 1's 3 motors, but drops horsepower to 800 and wheel torque to 9,500 pound-feet. The Hummer EV 3X will cost $99,995. It's a bargain. In 2023, the Hummer EV 2X is slated for release at $89,995. Now, this reduces the drive system to 1 motor up front and 1 in back, and it drops power ratings to 625 horsepower and 7,400 pound-feet of wheel torque. Plus, you lose the 0 to 60 in 3 seconds that the 3X and Edition 1 have. And finally, in 2024, the least expensive option. Are you ready? The Hummer EV2 will drop. $79,995. 2 motors, same horsepower, same torque rating as the 2X, but without the adaptive air ride suspension, without the extract mode, and without the 4-wheel steer with Crabwalk. Now, beyond the fact that GM is taking 4 years to release one truck model, this breakdown is interesting because of how GM sees the different levels of this truck. Essentially, they are pricing it based off of power availability and those super truck features like Crabwalk and extract mode and the 3-second 0 to 60 time. And what all of this tells me is that despite the fact that GM chose the pickup form factor to make its splashiest entry yet into the EV market, GM clearly thinks that it's going to be a while yet before EVs are capable of real truck things. Things like gooseneck or fifth wheel towing or loading the bed down with gravel and sand, or hell, putting plywood in the back. I mean, look, at the end of the day, as impressive as a 350-mile range is at this point in time, and it definitely is, and especially when you consider how large this truck is, at the end of the day, it's just not enough range for truck customers, especially when doing the things that you buy a truck for are going to eat that range for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Look, I think there's actually a very good chance here that this thing was priced at $100,000 at its most expensive and $80,000 at its least expensive to actually, dissuade or keep people from buying it. And because this way, GM pockets some profit margin on each of these trucks while signing up what are essentially going to be beta testers that help them figure out how to build a real electric truck. Now, if that sounds harsh, maybe it is. Maybe reviews of this thing will end up singing its praises and it'll be a great thing that's totally worth $112,000. But as of right now, this makes me more interested to see what electric truck startups like Rivian and Bollinger come to the table with first. Because unlike Ford and GM, Rivian and Bollinger don't have existing diesel and gas-powered truck lineups to lean on while they make an electric truck or figure out how to make an electric truck that is actually good for truck stuff. Rivian and Bollinger are going to have to make a compelling electric truck right out of the gate. And if that doesn't happen, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to have to worry about electric torque ratings and wheel torque ratings and how many motors you should opt for and whether or not there's a charging station on the way to work, any of that stuff for at least another 10 years. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up this look at the truckiness of the 2022 Hummer EV Edition 1. But I want to know what you guys think. What do you think of this truck's range, the lack of towing numbers that we have available to us right now, the off-road features, all of it? Sound off in the comments below. And if you like this video, found it informative in any kind of way, please do us a favor and hit that like button below. It really helps the channel out. And if you want more videos and coverage on the latest in construction equipment and trucks, visit us at our website at equipmentworld.com and subscribe to our daily newsletter. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel here and turn on notifications. Hit the bell so you're receiving up-to-the-minute alerts whenever we drop a new video. Thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time.